Hello everyone, welcome to the live Q&A portion of this Premio broadcast, recapping the very best and looking ahead at the impacts from ISE West 2023. Again, I'm your host Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B. Thanks for tuning in to that broadcast, and I know you've already taken in a lot of content, so what we want to do now is contextualize a lot of that. Look at some of the sort of post-show impacts, right? How are some of these trends already shaping up in the security and surveillance market, and also chat with some of our partners to help ground those perspectives. So let's get right to the meat of it. We're joined by Mr. Dustin Situ, Director of Product Management at Premio. Dustin, how you doing, man?
I'm well. It's good to see everyone again. Thank you for participating in our amazing webinar for security and surveillance.
Absolutely. It was really informative, and I know I had a great time there on the show floor, so pleasure getting to sit back down with you here and talk shop. We are also joined by Mr. Avi Baum. He's CTO of Halo. Avi, great to have you on. How you doing?
Hi, great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And we're also joined by Dilip Vutukuru, who was also there with us on the show floor at ISE West 2023. It's great to have him back. Again, Dilip is product manager at Ouster. Dilip, great to have you on as well. How are you?
Good to see you again, Daniel.
Yeah, real pleasure getting to chat. So everyone, let's get right to it. We have a lot of ground to cover, but Gabrielle mentioned it here in our tee-up. And I think it's important that we have our partners here because this is really the context that we need. One of the important themes and takeaways from ISE West 2023 was that importance of the ecosystem, right, that supports the security and surveillance industry. No one technology is really going to sort of rule or dominate the space, nor is security and surveillance even defined by one technology. It'd be a silly notion, honestly. So naturally, that ecosystem is key. I'm curious why y'all see that as, or why you saw that as such a leading topic at the show this year, right? It seems almost intuitive that that ecosystem would be always front and center in conversation, but it almost sounds like it was surprisingly front and center this time around. So give me your takeaways. Why do you think it was such a focus at this year's show?
I'll let the partners go first.
So maybe I'll jump in and start.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dilip. Go ahead.
I'll get started. So I've been thinking about this, how the ecosystem has come about. I feel security is a basic fundamental need of humans, not just businesses. And again, I go back millennia, right? Prehistoric times. Without security, humans probably wouldn't have survived in the wild. And then through the times of kings and into the 21st century, modern age. So perimeter protection, intrusion detection is a basic need. And consequently, over the decades or over the centuries, right, different technologies have come about and different companies have built niches in these areas. So I feel like that's how the ecosystems have come into existence that we are seeing today. And yeah, and that's the reason. That's what I feel. It's very important for us to focus on ecosystems to succeed in this market.
Avi, we'll go ahead and toss it your way.
I'll piggyback on what Dilip just said. So I'm sharing his view here and just moving fast forward on the timeline. I think that what happens is that in any technology cycle, when it starts to go to fruition and to become real deployment, you cannot survive without a very formidable and capable ecosystem. It's for interoperability. It's for everybody excelling in its own domain and serving together the whole ecosystem. I think that now that this domain becomes a real deployment scenario, it only is necessary and obvious that the ecosystem would become realizable. It's just like we had in the compute platform. As long as PCs were just a small form idea that could survive on its own, there were only few players. But as soon as it became something that is in the hands of everybody, you needed an ecosystem. So it was the Intels and the AMDs of the world on one hand, and the Microsofts on the other hand. Same went with mobile devices, and now it's the era of AI or edge computing, and therefore ecosystem is fundamental for making it a worldwide endpoint availability.
Cool. So I'll chime in too. So just kind of echo a lot of what they talked about. I really love from the beginning of the evolution of humans and how we've been able to survive. Avi mentioning a lot of where we are in the dawn of AI, but I really want to bring in some of that business perspective. I look at the market really from a business. And when you've been in business for around 30 plus years, I think what you really start to learn is to really better understand the customer journey. And when the customer's journey is looking for innovation, a lot of that is tapped into the newer technology that helps them be more efficient or more productive. So I like to tie that into what most technology companies or most companies in general, as they grow, they're always going to focus on some level of digital transformation. And every customer has a different stage of where they are in that digital transformation. But to me personally, the business side of it is really being able to stitch the ecosystem together to really help them succeed, to accelerate the time to market. And that really stems into these major ecosystem partnerships. And I think to kind of tap into what Avi mentioned, we are in the dawn of AI. And I've said this in many of my thought leadership podcasts, but we are no longer in the digitization of data, which was focused in the last cloud computing era. We're really about this digitization of automation by using these machine learning models to really build that autonomy, right? So continuously, these major tier one CEOs and the leaders of these major corporations continuously talk about the dawn of AI. Bill Gates talks about it. NVIDIA's leader talks about we're at the iPhone moment of AI and accelerated computing. And I like to follow a lot of this leadership. Even 2 days ago, Microsoft's current CEO, Satya Nadella, kind of made the metaphor of where ChatGPT is and how they're incorporating it into their models, right? We're literally moving from the bicycle to a steam engine. And if you think about that, that's incredible amounts of performance and incredible amounts of innovation. And to kind of conclude with my statement is we are starting to see that from a business model, an edge computing model that ties into our design, that puts in the requirements for our customers to succeed in these new harsh environments. There's requirements for remote management, decentralized distributed workloads, and ultimately a level of security.
I like that you finished there on sort of the Premio note. We'll get to some individual questions for each of your companies, but that tees me up nicely here because, again, the ecosystem is critical, right? It was a core theme at the show, and the security and surveillance industry and the goals that it's seeking to achieve, not only for businesses but as Dilip said for humanity, would be impossible without a lot of collaboration between the different nodes that make up that ecosystem, right? So naturally each company is going to have to treat their role in that ecosystem as a priority. So I wanted to open up the floor here and get y'all's perspectives on some examples of specific companies, or you can keep it general if you want, if you don't want to call anyone out, but feel free to as well. Just some companies in the security and surveillance space that you see executing on their individual layers while also working cohesively within that broader ecosystem, right? What are some examples of this done right, where that role in the ecosystem is taken as a priority and understood as if we do our part right and integrate sort of vertically and horizontally, then we will find success in the industry. Give us your thoughts.
Want to
That's all you, Dilip.
I'll go first as well. Yeah. So all the VMS systems, the video management systems, or PCM systems, physical security information management systems, these are good examples of the companies. Like companies like Genentech or Milestone, Lenel, Bosch, Honeywell. All these companies, they produce the VMS and PCM systems. That are really important, that are performing the function of aggregation, that are saying that they will be the aggregators, and as new technology solutions come in, like the Ouster's 3D digital lidar solution, uh, these companies are acting as their integrators to bring this to market.
Maybe one
Avi?
thing to add to that. Yes, so I'll just add on that aspect that, again, as a fairly young company, identifying the fact that the power of the whole is far better than the power of the one is something that we've decided on early on. And I think the key aspect here, and you mentioned the word collaboration, I would add to that also accountability. I think realizing that the size of the market is so big that everybody gets its share, and focusing on how to partner better and where are the boundaries of responsibility of each allows you to bring your excellence to the right sweet spot. When you asked about how can it be done right, and where is the pitfalls, I think the more you invest on interfacing better, for example, in the VMS domain, interfacing better to those market leaders that were mentioned here, with the sensor world interfacing better to a variety of sensors, this is a key item in allowing the ecosystem to thrive. And it is fundamental in making this bottom line that the whole is far bigger than each dominant excelling point of the various companies.
Hmm.
Cool. No, I think again, bringing in some of this business perspective, and I think how you ask the question is the keyword in there is the execution.
Yeah.
So I think first and foremost, execution stems down to really better understanding what you as a company do well, what your capabilities are before going out there and really reaching out to the ecosystem to plug certain areas where you can improve to build a stronger foundation. And from a Premio perspective, right, our position in the ecosystem is most valuable for a lot of our end users when they have some type of software that they developed for an application that's doing some of the data processing, collecting that data, and doing real-time decision making, but not necessarily better understanding how the hardware is integrated into that interoperability. And what we do best is now with this new edge AI trends and this explosion is we're trying to design the best type of computer for real-time decision making, lower latency that drives new autonomy. And we use that, right, with a lot of different ecosystem partnerships, whether it be through a Halo M8 module that does, lower TDP, a decent amount of TOPS specific for applications that require real-time decision making.
And I want to intersect another trend that is shaping not just security and surveillance, but really the whole industry 4.0 world. It's both a trend and kind of a point of contention, a point of debate, and that's the role of standardization and interoperability and sort of that pull, right, between black box solutions and solutions that are meant to be either open source and customizable or meant to be, interoperable within any system. What role do you think standardization of systems, of networks, of underlying technologies, what role do you think that standardization plays in promoting this interoperable ecosystem we're talking about within security and surveillance? And did you see any specific discussions or proposals on that note at ISE West 2023?
I'll mix it up. I'll go first. So I think if you look at standardization as a principle, I think it's extremely important to have that in order to move to methods and procedures for the real world business to succeed. Because once you have standardizations in place, that means you have controllable processes that multiple partners or multiple ecosystem vendors can leverage to really solve a specific problem. So again, I have to speak from the hardware perspective because Premio has been doing this for 30 plus years. So if you think of the standardization, right, from a hardware performance, we do have standards that are highly beneficial for interoperability between hardware. So one major standard is PCIe. You have multiple generations, 3, 4, 5. But what that's basically doing is increasing bandwidth, really doing lower latency for high performance type of compute. I mean, if you look at the IOs, there's also standardizes there that drives computer vision. You have standards for GigE, USB. Even now where you're moving into more high performance type of vision based type of things, you have standards like the gigabit multimedia serial link, which is GSML, that's starting to be seen in a lot of these newer designs. And then most importantly, how do you stitch all that together and push it into data telemetry, right? You now have newer bands for 5G, right? New specific sub-6 waves, sub-gigahertz waves that are designed in a way for ultra low latency, more bandwidth for faster uplink and downlink, and most importantly is this machine to machine communication, right? And that's where we're starting to move into these newer interoperability ecosystem areas.
So maybe
interrupt. Go ahead, Avi.
Just to add on that, on the software side of things, I think that unlike hardware, at least from the perspective of the new coming era that was mentioned here from multiple times, software still awaits more interoperable standards, and that will allow this transition that I mentioned earlier to real deployment. This is still a barrier that is not well enough thought of, and as a result, there are still some friction in the adoption of those new coming solutions. But I am quite confident that the more it will be adopted, this standardization would come, as I said, in any other industry that survived through the cycle of hype to actual deployment. There are always standards, and the big players are already acting in this domain. And once it's done, then we will be in much better shape for the manifestation of the technology.
Yeah, for us, I'll speak from a LiDAR and a detection technology perspective. For Ouster, our 3D digital LiDARs and the Gemini software perception platform that's running the AI elements of it on the Premium's hardware, all of this forms the core of detection technology. But detection is only one part of the end to end value chain of security, right? So without
Hmm.
interoperability, we don't have the exposure, or we cannot go global, we cannot achieve the scale. So that's really, I feel, at this stage, there is a subtle gap in the security industry, because if an end customer is a Genetech shop, then they ask us to integrate with Genetech, and if the end customer is a Milestone or a Bosch shop, then we have to integrate with them separately. So interoperability here would really help us to achieve scale, and there is an opportunity here in the security industry for to foster this interoperability among the ecosystem, so newer technologies can succeed faster. Um, yeah, those are my observations from the ISC West.
Yeah, also, I think one thing to mention, I think to stitch both the software, hardware, and sensor, one thing that I do notice that I picked up very quickly at ISC West is the standardization of a lot of these open source models that are being trained that can be pulled from the cloud into real world applications. And although there are standards of these open source models, I think the main goal that I've seen is they're trying to figure out the complexity of how to bridge the physical world of the assets into this digital world. And this is where you have newer applications building these amazing digital twins of the actual facility or whatever the spatial awareness is of that space. And this is where like you're starting to see this amazing metaverse type of feel where you can remotely manage, you can interact with the data with real digital twins of the security and surveillance space.
What I want to do now is give each of y'all a chance to speak in a more focused way about your slice of that ecosystem and how your company and the work that your company is doing is helping to execute on that essential layer of the ecosystem. So we're going to start with Premio, and then we'll jump over to Ouster and Halo. So Dustin, question for you here. In what ways do some of the more recent developments in edge computing, including improvements in real-time data processing, and namely the addition of sort of edge AI computing capabilities, how do those recent developments enable some of the other technologies in the surveillance and security industry and ecosystem to perform more effectively? And if you had to maybe summarize, what role do you see edge computing playing in that ecosystem?
Sure. So I think bottom line, as you saw throughout the broadcast, I think compute will only continue to grow, and the importance of it is going to be a major requirement in order to stitch the ecosystem together. So, like I mentioned during a lot of my podcasts and in the broadcast, I use that statistic, right? 75% of data is going to be processed outside the cloud. And I think that monumental shift of the data shifting to the edge requires newer compute architectures and resources to be more critical. So how to stitch kind of that story together, I really pay attention to a lot of the market leaders and what they're trying to do from a hardware perspective, because we're focused in hardware engineering for industrial compute. So on the base core level of that, if you look at the semiconductor silicon, right, you can kind of get a sense that these major companies are trying to stitch together their cloud to edge portfolio. So I'll give you an example. You have your AMDs making acquisitions for Xilinx, and Xilinx traditionally has been fundamentally great at FPGA, right? So you can kind of get a sense why. What's the reason for that, right? So you're using more complex instruction set of compute, integrating with FPGA to deliver even faster performance without even going back to the host computer. Another major player that everyone keeps talking about for AI, NVIDIA, they acquired Mellanox. So you ask why, right? So think about NVIDIA, what their core capability is that parallel compute delivering real time combined with high-speed network from Mellanox. That's another way that it can stitch that parallel compute to high-speed network, right? So if you kind of think about all those acquisitions and that edge to cloud portfolio that they're trying to build, each company has that secret sauce on what they're trying to do to enable better performance for edge AI workloads. But I think to kind of address that second part of your question, right, is, what role does edge computing play in the ecosystem? We're still early, in my opinion, but I think there's principles that a lot of people can better understand that can translate from that cloud computing era, right? So in cloud computing era, we've been exposed to this cloud native type of term, right? Cloud native, in summary, is basically principles on how you can run applications in a cloud environment, in a safe environment. But now when the data shifts out to the edge, I'm starting to hear more of this new term that's coming to fruition, which is edge native. And within that principles of what edge native is, there are 4 key differentiators I think the ecosystem is trying to do. Number one being this decentralized processing, right? And I've mentioned this multiple times, it's how you're shifting compute resources to the edge and reducing the ability to communicate to central servers. And when you have that, you have faster response times, real-time decision-making. Second would be the localized data storage, right? So instead of using all your storage that moves in and out and back and forth with the cloud that has latency issues, when you have local storage, you have that ability to interact with that data, and that addresses the bandwidth issues that ensures the resilience of data for that application. Third would be, how do you optimize resources for the edge specifically? And this is where we really come into play as Premio, because when you have limited resources, you have to only pull what is available within your design. And that demand really ties into lightweight designs, lower power, more optimized for specific type of hardware acceleration. And I think fourth ties into that standardization of how the open source AI models are being used for intelligence automation. And when you pull models, neural network models, to the edge for inference, you're starting to see real-time decision-making, more trigger actions based on what situational awareness for local autonomous events. And I think that's an amazing part of this industry that continues to grow.
All right, we're going to pitch it over to Dilip at Ouster now. So I've got a few more questions for you, Dilip. First off, kind of a similar question to what I just posed to Dustin. How does 3D LiDAR technology, the bread and butter of Ouster, how does that fit into the interoperable ecosystem of the security and surveillance industry in your eyes, right? What role does it play? Why is it important?
Yeah, so I feel the security landscape is changing rapidly. The threat actors are becoming a lot more smarter, and they're adapting to all the technology that's happening out there. So the industry is looking for low latency, highly sensitive detection technologies. That's what they're looking for. So from a Ouster scope standpoint, that's what a 3D digital LiDAR combined with our Gemini perception software is providing. It provides a centimeter level accuracy. We don't need any ambient lighting. And we can see through fog. So rain or snow, it doesn't matter. We can see through all of those. So that's how the LiDAR is solving the needs of security.
And beyond that, every technology obviously has to play its role, and with that comes some kinks, some challenges, right? What would you say are some of the challenges right now in integrating 3D LiDAR technology specifically with other security and surveillance technologies? And how do you think an interoperable ecosystem might be able to help mitigate some of those challenges? Maybe if you can speak to some of the nascency of this technology in some of those challenges.
Yeah, one of the main challenges, there is probably a wait and go play or game is being played a little bit, because the AI is advancing at such a fast pace, and the hardware is also adapting and getting enhanced at a fast pace that customers are waiting a little bit. They're waiting to see when should they jump in, because they don't want to, unlike IT, right? The hardware investments in for the edge applications, they have to stay in commissioning or stay working for 5-10 years. So that's one dynamic that's being played out. So some innovations in hardware that makes hardware as a node that customers can add on and keep enhancing the compute capabilities is one challenge, that would help the lidar detection technology to prosper. Um, Other than that, it's education. It's mainly education, the fear of unknown. And the more we talk to customers and we describe to them, we show them the benefits of 3D detection technology and what and the kind of capabilities that edge AI is unlocking. They're opening up. They're opening up, and we are using some advanced technologies, virtualization technologies, and also distributed compute at the edge technologies, so that we are convincing, or we are informing customers that they shouldn't have to revamp their entire edge compute hardware. They can just add on new compute nodes or new capabilities as the AI advances, so they don't have to throw away the existing infrastructure. They just add on to it. So those are some ways we are trying to address these challenges. But yeah, I'd like to hear what Avi has to say here
Yeah, sure. So,
eventually.
yeah, I'll speak to the point that was mentioned. So, I think that again, when we look at the building blocks of the different ecosystem, each has its own space. We are focusing on the processing power, and we have made a very conscious choice to deal with this in an agnostic way, so that it is not tailored to a specific type of sensor. It can bring on a vision sensor, it can bring on a LiDAR. And in that sense, we are friends with the ecosystem. And in that area, when people are reluctant to add a new sensor, we bring the angle that it's not different from a processing perspective. You get to know the same software stack, and vice versa. If somebody already has experience with its own sensor, with, let's say, an ouster sensor, they don't need to compromise on a specific AI accelerator. In our case, they can use our accelerator without any compromise. And in that sense, we are also very reliant on the ecosystem, also on the hardware providers like Premio, in the sense that our own expertise does not cater to the end product. For that, we rely on those who cater the edge boxes and the compute platforms. And I was just listening in the broadcast to my former colleagues speaking about in the former panel speaking about cloud and edge, and I do think that the proliferation of edge AI is not contrastive to cloud. In fact, it's complementary, and the more AI on the edge, there will be more use of cloud AI. However, unlikely that it sounds, but it will actually propel more usage across the ecosystem. So being able to accommodate the different models and being agnostic to them is something that we feel is very fundamental.
I'll go ahead and
Good
pitch
to hear.
over some questions now to Avi, specifically on Halo. So our audience is aware. Again, Halo specializes in sensor accelerators, right? And I won't spend too much time explaining that. I'll let Avi do all the hard work there. But Avi, how does a sensor accelerator with its domain-specific architecture, how does that fit into this ideal interoperable ecosystem for security and surveillance, right? Where do you see it playing some of the most key roles in the short term and the long term?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we are in fact a domain-specific architecture processor, and the reason for that is that rides on the wave of the stagnation of Moore's law that is well spoken about. In that sense, the only avenue to break the confines of the traditional general purpose compute platform is to start becoming more domain specific or slightly more domain specific. And in that sense, what we are doing is we are focusing on accelerating neural network. However, having said that, we still want to be versatile enough to address, as I mentioned earlier, different types of sensors and also different types of working point. So the operating point of a deep edge or very tied to the sensor is one operational point, but sometimes you want to aggregate multiple sensors. So you have sort of an edge box, and sometimes you have a bigger edge box. So this is why we are catering two types of solutions. One is as a pure add-on, as an accelerator for this domain of AI, which is an add-on to an existing box, and that caters for gateways. And we also cater for what we call VPUs or vision processors that are basically sensor attached units, and they are smaller scale to a certain extent, doing less activity, but for a specific sensor. So they're smaller, even lower power, and this kind of caters to a span of edge devices that we feel are in a need to be powered with more AI.
Well
Now,
said.
oh, yeah, Dustin, do you have anything else you want to jump in on there?
No, it's well said. Is I love the different perspective from the multiple parts of the ecosystem. I think it's really valuable because everyone has their own perspective, from sensor to accelerator to compute, right? It's very interesting for me.
So I'm curious then, Avi, to kind of tie this in with some of the advancements in edge computing and the need for reliable edge computing in supporting the security and surveillance use cases of today. How do you see sensor accelerators, contributing to that real-time data processing and decision-making in security systems that often and increasingly happens at the edge? And why is that such an important piece of the security ecosystem?
Yes, so let me tie that to what was said about, and these days when everybody knows what ChatGPT is, or at least from a user experience perspective, I think it's much easier to speak to what I mentioned earlier about the split between cloud and edge. And that's why I really a great believer in this complementary approach. And to address your question in that sense, the way I view it is the following. I think that the use cases in the security world are, or in any market segment, are actually splitting into two. There is enhancement of existing use cases. So things that you already know from the ancient days that Dilip started with a sentry guarding a perimeter to nowadays where you have a camera guarding a perimeter. And this is kind of an enhancement use case because the use case is there. You know what you want. You want to detect violence, for example, or do access control. And this is an existing use case, and you just want to address it better. And all the way to new coming use cases, which were not present formerly, or that they are completely different usage model, like for the system or the camera to offer what to protect. And in the age of ChatGPT, this is something that is no longer a fantasy. So speaking for a moment on the enhancement side today, you can just think of doing much better detection with much higher accuracy because you understand the semantics of the environment with those AI models. And with that, false alarms go drop down. The false triggering, if you have rain or foliage and things like that, which people have been struggling with in former solutions, these are no longer the case when you start deploying Edge AI to the decision making element at the edge or at the camera level. And jumping to the new coming use cases, the operator that is today required to mark no entrance area zones or regions where you are not allowed to trigger an event or you should be triggering an event. This is something that is still today not done fully automatically. And within the era of generative AI, you can start thinking of the machine proposing which areas, because of the semantics and the nature of the scene, are less likely to allow access of people, and the system can offer those automatic triggering, let alone the fact that it could do textual summarization or even audible summarization of like 20-hour shift of a century. So all kinds of new use cases that to the people of our age may blow our mind, and to the people of tomorrow will be just a way of using a surveillance system. So that's my take on it.
I want to open it up now to Dustin and to Dilip and Avi. Continue to chime in here as well. But on this note of AI, what impact would you say, all of you, that the rise of Edge AI has had on specifically the scalability and the flexibility of modern and emerging security systems within this interoperable ecosystem, right? I guess, yeah, give us some of the pros, and then I'll ask a follow-up.
Okay. So again, I think from my perspective, I don't know if it makes it any like harder, but from a design perspective, but I think it creates a level of pressure. And then in business, again, I think pressure is highly beneficial because it creates competition that forces companies to look at ways or new innovative ways that are defined by market demand to be more competitive. So if you kind of look at the overall business landscape, right, semiconductor technology, I think for the past 2 years, during COVID, post COVID, have been a major focal point, right? And you can see this has been a major evident in a lot of pop culture news is this conflict of semiconductor technology between China and United States, right? United States, from a security and surveillance, banned all type of Chinese camera manufacturers, right? And then a couple days ago, China banned products from Micron. So like this back and forth of technology and why it's so important really stems down into the key technologies that are going to shape the future for better type of intelligence. And how that ties into what we're doing from a compute architecture, it forces us to not only focus on things that are traditionally been used. So within the portfolio of different compute architectures, you have your traditional x86 based on Intel or AMD. You have NVIDIA's platforms based on the new Jetson, Orin type of things. You also have ARM technologies that are more low power. And then last but not least, from a domain-specific architecture, what I learned most from ISC West is that you have all these new companies putting major investments into doing very specific type of processing and acceleration, right? And I think that really stems and comes down to how that data is being used and what is the benefit of that data and what it's doing to really create a level of autonomy for the ecosystem.
So, I mean, for me, the
Oh yeah, go
advances
go ahead.
in edge. So, a few thoughts on that, right? How are advances in edge AI helping us do our jobs better or create more innovations to solve the surveillance industry's problems, right? So, for us, we can do more classifications, more scene or more personalized classifications. For example, a warehouse in the middle of a desert, it may have different kinds of intrusions. Maybe a bowl of grass that's getting blown through and it's coming through the fence. That could be it could be an object. A typical object detection system will say, hey, there is something moving there, right? But we don't know what it is. But because of AI, we can develop models that auto detect these things for a specific site and make our system more valuable. And these capabilities were not possible 5, 10 years ago, because when the compute architecture was super expensive, the the frameworks weren't available. So increasingly, with the advances in hardware accelerators and other GPUs that Dustin mentioned, we are hoping to solve more use cases and make it more valuable for our customers in the security industry.
And would any of you say that the implementation of Edge AI, even though it has these benefits and it is providing that scalability for use cases to become not only more reliable, but for each node in the security and surveillance ecosystem to play a more critical role in the ecosystem, right? Would you say that Edge AI has made it harder at all to maintain a functioning ecosystem, maybe because of that wide decentralization of each node playing a more critical role in each use case? Any challenges on that front?
I can probably answer that. So let me kind of say and set the stage of the ultimate goal of Edge AI is to build what I have learned and what I've seen in a lot of applications is this closed loop of autonomy. Once you're able to really reach that closed loop of autonomy, there's key steps within that really drive the application to the success of full scale autonomy. I think number one, which really stems from the sensor technologies that Ouster is putting together in their LiDAR, focuses on this cognition. If you're able to build the cognition, that really needs to come from the situational awareness that is funneling in from all these data points. These data points can be an array of different sensors. And with IoT and the proliferation of all these IoT data sensors, you now have the eyes pulling in all this data. But like we've learned in the past decade or a few decades, that big push was for big data. But if you have all this big data and you don't have the intelligence to actually compute that data or better understand what it is, then it's just meaningless. And I think that's where we are currently now, is we know what the data is. We have models that have been trained with data, and they're becoming smarter, ChatGPT being a major, major force in that, right? And you start to have intelligence that is driving digital twins, like I've mentioned. And then last but not least, to kind of close that is, once you're able to stitch the sensor to the intelligence of the brain, you now have the ability to control, with hopefully generative AI and with regulation in place, the machine now, without the human, can now do or make a decision without even any human interaction, right? And that, I think, me personally, that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to create this closed loop of autonomy from the sensors all the way to the intelligence, and with future proofing generative AI.
Yeah, I feel the decentralization of the edge AI compute hardware in general is beneficial for us, because what it means is it reduces the blast radius of one node going out of going commission or getting compromised, right? So other nodes in the ecosystem can take on the load of the sensor streams that are coming in, and they continue to perform. So from that sense, the decentralization of the edge AI and is really beneficial for us. Um, yeah, those are my thoughts. Yeah.
Maybe one thing to add here, going back to the way the question was posed, is that in a way, I think there are two flip sides. One is an upside and one is a downside. So the upside of decentralization is definitely the fact that one location or one endpoint does not hold all the data on one end, and it does not convey unnecessary data. Therefore, it's much harder to compromise, because instead of just driving all the raw data of a sensor, you actually filter it to only on a need to know basis, so to speak. So that's a major pro in the sense of ecosystems, and specifically in the surveillance and security ecosystem. On the other hand, of course, as you mentioned, as you posed the question, there is, of course, a challenge of continuing to manage this whole environment and making it intact and make sure that it is complementary to one another as we wish it to be. And that is something that, again, this standardization should help in that aspect. But at the end of the day, it does raise the bar on the complexity of maintenance to that, at least from our viewpoint as a process, as an edge processor.
And I think a lot of those challenges, I imagine, will become simpler to manage as this technology evolves from being bleeding edge to being more standardized. And I think that's just going to take a lot of adoption. It's going to take some experimentation, and again, taking a note from this sort of foundational necessity of companies collaborating on use cases within this ecosystem, also probably collaborating on best practices for maintaining, managing, and keeping uptime strong for edge AI powered sensors, cameras, you name it, in the security and surveillance ecosystem. So I'm excited to see that develop in real time, and I'm sure we'll have plenty more conversations as we see those trends develop. Guys, it's been great so far. We're just about to wrap up. Thank you to our audience for tuning in for this broadcast, and to our partners in the Premio team as well. My last question for our panel here is, what advice would you have for companies to encourage some more of that collaboration across the security and surveillance industry, whether it's on just literally fundamentally making their technology work with other technologies, or whether it's a little more esoteric, right? We're talking training, best practices, tips on product development and launches even. And maybe where do you think they should be collaborating to make sure that their technology continues to fit into and support this ecosystem?
So my advice to all of our customers and businesses out there, uh, be open, because security is a age-old problem, and the use cases are probably well understood, but technology is changing at such a fast pace that to solve the same problem, there are newer ways to solve it. So, and lidar is one such thing, combined with the edge AI advances that we are talking about here. So my advice is just be open, try out these newer technologies in a controlled environments, maybe at a smaller scale. Build some confidence in those systems, and then before you go global with it.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in as well, and I'm in full agreement with Dilip. This is the approach we've taken. So I think openness is critical on two aspects. It's be open in the way you conduct business, and be open-minded in thinking differently on traditional problems. The first is mainly the way you conduct business, share whatever is shareable. If it's software, then open source. If it's hardware, then the ability to interface properly, and open-minded in the sense that with the new coming technology, you can solve ancient problems in different and quite fascinating ways.
And being this is a Premio broadcast and live webinar, I'll definitely conclude. I think Avi and Auster brought definitely the perspective on the technical side, and just kind of put that cherry on top from a business perspective, like Avi mentioned. I think first and foremost, before any type of ecosystem collaboration can even happen, I think as each company, you need to clearly understand and identify what you do best. Without having that understanding of what you do best, it's unable to move into the market and convince the ecosystem to know what you're doing best. Next is then you can review the collaboration. And then I think the next major step, as an advice for myself, being in this industry for 11 years and the company being in this industry for 30 plus years, is to really pay attention, start internally, really work with your customers, your partners, listen carefully to their requirements. Because if you'd really truly pay attention, many of the ideas and their pain points are potential starting points to review the ecosystem for collaboration. And then the last advice that I would give is, the perspective similar to the concept of follow the money, right? If you follow the money, you get your answers. So instead of following the money, if you follow that data pipeline, I think you will be able to identify the key vendors or key partners in the technologies of what they're doing well that allows your ecosystem to grow, right? An example of that would be currently, I'm very current pop, culture topic is why has AMD and NVIDIA been so successful in their growth in the last decade? They've been able to leverage the technology, the innovation from Taiwan's TSMC in their fabless line of design to really scale for their end customers to succeed extremely, extremely fast for better performance.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're going to see those, those kinds of use cases and real world examples be points of inspiration and learning lessons, right, for the rest of the industry. So I love that final takeaway, right? Focus on execution before collaboration, because you can't really collaborate if you don't have anything to bring to the table. So if every company takes on, every company in the industry, in the ecosystem takes on that responsibility and that priority of making sure that they know their role well in the industry, they can execute on it well, and they future-proof and look ahead at the evolutions that are coming, then collaboration, I imagine, is just going to continue to be seamless and natural. And there might be some opportunities for collaboration we can't even imagine yet, and I'm excited to see what those are going to pan out to be. And I think on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap up the live broadcast here. So thank you again to all of our participants, all of the folks that were on the panels and the interviews and product overviews from the actual trade show, and again to our live Q&A panelists, Dilip Vudukuru, Product Manager at Ouster, Avi Baum, CTO at Halo, and Dustin C2, Director of Product Management at Premio. Make sure you go check out everyone's websites to learn a little bit more about the role they're playing in this ecosystem, and also to check out some of the cutting-edge advancements they're bringing to their slice of the security and surveillance industry. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure you're heading to premioinc.com. Again, that's premioinc.com for not only a full breakdown of all the content you saw on today's live broadcast from ISC West 2023, but plenty of other great thought leadership on the evolutions of edge computing. You'll see some podcasts with my face on it, and plenty of other great resources, white papers, videos, you name it. I'm your host, Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B. Thanks for tuning in to this Premio live broadcast recapping the trends, technologies, and impacts of ISC West 2023. We'll catch you on the next one.